We're good. Okay. September the 6th, prayer walk. We will have a special time for prayer in our worship service on Sunday, September the 6th, for our local educators. Bible fellowship groups are encouraged to prayer walk for one of these school campuses the evening at 6 o'clock. Eaton High School, Adams Middle School, Sluter Elementary, Nance Elementary, International Leadership of Texas, or Bonds Ranch Elementary School, the new elementary school across from Cross Church. Church business meetings and fellowship. On Sunday, September the 13th, there will be a special business meeting to get an update on the church finances. This is going to be held at the North Richland Hills campus at 6 p.m. And after the meeting, there will be a fellowship. Please plan to attend. Financial Peace University will begin on September the 19th through the 23rd. Classes are available in person or via Zoom. Child care will only be available for in-person classes. Your choices are Saturday mornings 9 to 11, Sunday evenings 4:30 to 6:30, and Wednesday evenings 6:30 to 8:30. As part of Financial Peace University, a new track is also offered. The Legacy Journal leads you into deeper investing, basic estate planning, powerful living, safeguarding your legacy, and discovering keys to generational wealth and true generosity. This will be offered at the North Richland Hills campus on Sunday evenings from 4:30 to 6:30. Sign up at ccdfw.org/FTU. Marriage Night simulcast, Saturday, September the 12th, from 5:30 to 9:30. Couples, whether you're engaged or been married for 60 years or plus, you will not want to miss the date night opportunity to focus on marriage. And that is it for the announcements. So, Jeremy, how are you?
I'm great.
Would you like to?
No, not at all. I just heard this was the Birds and the Bees Sunday, Song of Solomon, so I thought I'd come listen to y'all.
Okay.
All right. Is that all right?
Yes.
Oh,
yes. Yes. All right. If I can have a moment of worship here. Dear Lord, thank you for this time that we can come together and study your word. Please open our hearts and our minds and let us hear what you have to say to us. For it's in Jesus' name I pray. All right, Will.
Okay. I was wondering if there's anything else going to happen or before I did it. Guess, could everybody hear okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But you know, today's lesson's on a little book that probably a lot of people have never considered too much, but it's in the Bible. It's called Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon. Most of the Bibles, I think, still entitle it the Song of Solomon. Our lesson gave it the title of Song of Songs, and that's in my Bible. That's the first line. It talks about the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. So, you know, it's probably let me say it, it's about the sexiest book in the Bible. It's got a, it's a, it's dealing with Solomon and his marriage to a young Shulamite woman, and it's a poetic thing. Some scholars I read had thought maybe it was a collection of these songs that are sung at wedding feast. You remember a wedding feast? Jesus went to a wedding feast where he was asked by his mother to help, and he turned the water into wine. Wedding feast back in Solomon's day, especially between two important families, really could go on for days. In fact, I read one description where they said they would actually put the groom and the bride on kind of like thrones, and they were kind of like a king and a queen for the ceremonies, and oversaw the ceremonies, and the ceremonies could go on for days before the wedding was finished. I would assume that, you know, kind of depending on the amount of wealth that family has, some weddings would go on for days and others would go on for maybe only a day. Have a wedding feast, kind of like today. They have a lot of weddings. They'll have a dinner or something before or after a wedding, and depending on the family, whether it was going to be a dinner for everybody or a dinner for the families or whatever. But this Song of Songs is just a poetic chronicle of Solomon's romantic relationship with this Shulamite woman. If you go to chapter 6, verse 13, it names her there a Shulamite woman. And if in my Bible, it had little subheadings, you know, where she's speaking and he's speaking, and others are speaking. The commentary said that there's the woman, there's another, just a young woman, there's a narrator, and there's brothers, as well as Solomon, and kind of all blends together. Produce some insights into God's wisdom regarding relationships and love and marriage. And, you know, in this lesson, which really doesn't start until chapter 2, verse 15, on down to chapter 3, verse 5, just prior to our lesson, the man, Solomon, has invited the bride to go for a walk with him on a warm spring day, with flowers blooming and the bees are buzzing, and even the grapevines blooming. And she using figurative language. Now let me just comment about a few things about this deal. There's a lot of figurative language in it. And we just heard Pastor Jeremy, give us a sermon from the book of Revelations. The book of Revelations has a lot of figurative language in it. One of my favorite professors in seminary, New Testament professor, Dr. Curtis Vaughn, I took every class I could take in New Testament under him. Great professor, a terrible, horrible tester. His tests were really bad. But Dr. Vaughn had written a lot of commentaries, invited by different authors, and he'd been invited several times, he said, to write a commentary about Revelation, the book of Revelations, and he always refused. And he said they finally asked him, well, why won't you? And he said, well, frankly, I don't know what it means. when you come to figurative language, it's tied to the culture local at that time. And, the book of Revelations was written a couple of thousand years ago. This Song of Solomon was written long before that. And the figurative language that they use probably loses a little bit in its interpretation as we try to interpret it today compared to what it was originally meant when it was written and when it was current. I hope you get the picture there. So what happens is that we try to interpret this and derive lessons from it based on our concept of the figurative language today that was really only current back long ago when it was written. And so you sometimes get a lot of differences when people start trying to interpret it. And I was reading, I've got an old commentary that was written back about the turn of the century, and it was quite a bit difference in it and what our Sunday school writers put in our quarterlies today. So just kind of keep that in mind. And, kind of a preference of the lesson too about the fact, God invented sex, okay? I mean, he invented men and women, and sex is an important part of those relationships, and he intended for a husband and wife to enjoy it, and he intended them to procreate and have children possible, and there's nothing dirty, regardless of what our parents or grandparents tried to hammer in our heads. There's nothing dirty about healthy sex and a loving marriage. And this book is a little bit sexy. So it's I think the authors of the lesson may have stretched some of the figurative language to make their points that they wanted to make for today's culture, but we'll kind of deal with that as we go. And I said, this starts off with Solomon inviting his bride-to-be to go for a walk with him in this garden. And I'm sure in those days it was chaperoned. They had chaperoning. And she's talking in this case, and look at verse 15. She says, catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. Well, it ends up in this vineyard at springtime. Seems in reality, foxes, like to dig dens. And one of the threats to the vineyard was that foxes would get in and dig in under the grapevines and actually just destroy the vine. But they'd also, foxes like dogs, sometimes you've seen dogs eat grass. Foxes sometimes would eat the young leaves off of the vines. And there was one report in the commentary that said that I think it was in England, perhaps, that somebody killed a fox. In the stomach of the fox, it was full of grapes. They actually like to eat the grapes off of the vines. So she's using the figurative language of this to also kind of say, hey, there's these little things like little foxes that can come along and also destroy our relationship as husband and wife. And so, there are distractions in a marriage that can damage the relationship. Some of these distractions may seem harmless at first, but, before long, those distractions can start separating the couple, and they end up not spending the time they need to together. Perhaps now with the coronavirus, we're spending more time than we need to together. Everybody's kind of stuck at home, and so their distractions. What kind of distractions today would tend to maybe end up causing a hurt in relationship between the husband and wife? Anybody?
Money. Money.
What?
Money was mentioned, Will. Money.
Maybe he's not here.
My phone's trying to ring and it's on intercom. I'm not sure. I was thinking about saying, like work. I mean, a guy can get so wrapped up in work and his desire to excel and climb up the corporate ladder, or to make his business a success, that he's always at work. He's always thinking about work, and even if he comes home, he's so tired that he not much of a companion. He just wanting to rest. I think work could be one of them. Even hobbies. Like a guy that maybe likes motorcycles, and he ends up taking motorcycles and get some buddies that like to go riding together, and they even may want to make over the weekend trip something without their wives and just go. And, if things become obsessive like that, women could do the same things with other activities. But in fact, if the husband started doing something like that, then the wife may say, well, if you're going to do that, well, then I'm going to go do this. And they just keep, I have to cut the phone off, I guess. They end up and just start having so much time taken away that one or the other of them may end up getting a little bit of what I'd call wanderlust. They start having the opportunity to be around somebody of the other sex, and that part of their life is maybe not being very fulfilled, and before you know it, before they even realize it, they end up in a relationship with somebody other than their wife or husband. And of course that's never good. But when she's describing these grapevines and they're in blossom and all this, and the lesson kind of describes the grapevines, the sweet smell, the beautiful blossoms. Have any grapevines that have beautiful blossoms or smell? I've got two grapevines. This year the harvest was, well, this getting a harvest for the first time in many years. But grapevines, mine, Concord grapes, have little bitty tiny blossoms. The only way that they would be very beautiful to me is that when you look at a big cluster of those little bitty tiny blossoms, you get to thinking, hey, that's going to be a big cluster of grapes. If they hold on and get ripe, that's going to be really a beautiful bunch of grapes, and make me a lot of grape juice so that I can make a lot of grape jam. I like a grape jam for my PB&J sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And in that sense, they're beautiful and great, but I've not really seen personally any grapevines that made a beautiful flower. And I've smelled of them, tried to smell of them, and I don't I don't get much of a smell out of them. I've never been able to really determine whether there's any smell there or not. There may be a little bit, but it's very faint, if any. But I think the point is that she's trying to make with this figurative language is she's telling her potential or future mate, we need to take care that those little foxes don't tear up the grapevines, tear up our life, and end up separating us, and we don't have the relationship that we should have as a husband and wife. They go on to verse 16, talks about building trust, and he says, "My beloved is mine, and I am his. He grazes among the lilies." You notice how they're dedicated to each other. My beloved is mine, and I am his. It's a mutual devotion. She affirms the depth of love that God intends for a couple to enjoy in marriage. And this man and woman in this poem setting is kind of a living snapshot of what love is supposed to be in a marriage, and you have this mutual submission. I guess the best place that we've got in the Bible for this would probably be that passage in Ephesians 5:21-33, and I've asked somebody to read that. Somebody go ahead and read that, Ephesians 5:21-33.
Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior.
You
Now,
there?
as the church submits.
Hey, I'm going to press the deal again. It kept ringing. I can't.
Robert called, and he didn't know you were teaching, and
Well,
so I answered. I was afraid something was wrong, but anyway, he's coming by about 12. Okay, I'm sorry to bother you. I was on my way to tell you.
yeah, we got a call. I got the internet back done. Yeah, Paul says that the woman submit to the husband, but he also says then that the husband should be to life like Christ was to the church, which means he's willing to die for her. He wants her to be pure. He wants, he's supposed to honor her, respect her. So it's a two-way street there, but each with their own roles. And I think that, like honoring, respecting, I heard an illustration one time that the man should be the umbrella of the family, and if the man starts allowing things into his life that shouldn't be, it's just like tearing a hole in that umbrella, and you get out there in the rain, then that rain comes right through on the family. So the man, after he gets married and starts having a family, he's never just doing things for himself. Everything he does is also for the family. I remember when I was young, people used to talk about marriage as being a 50-50 proposition. But I've kind of grown to think that it's more of a 100% proposition. You do 100% of everything you can to make your wife happy, to satisfy her, to make a good home. And she does 100% to do the same for you. And when you both have that kind of an attitude, it helps. And you gotta have that time together and know each other. The man in that description in Ephesians, I think it directly implies that the man should be the one that leads the family in worship. He's the one that makes up the mind, keeping the family pure. You don't condone watching movies and TV programs that you shouldn't be watching and your children shouldn't be exposed to. The man is the one that's supposed to take the lead on that. And according to, I think, what Paul's writing about there in Ephesians. But I think sometimes, often men fail at that. And that's one of the problems in a lot of marriages. That last part of that verse is kind of interesting. He said the woman's declaration in the last part said, he grazes among the lilies. The lesson said that was just, like an anticipation of intimacy after their wedding. It looks forward to the day when she and he would, not have to hold themselves back, that they could give themselves to each other completely without any reservations. Down in verse 17, look at verse 17. He says, until the day breathes and the shadows flee, turn, my beloved, be like a gazelle or a young stag on cliff mountains. There seems like she's trying to be descriptive and using this figurative language to tell a little bit more about how their intimacy would be expressed after they're married. And it says her description shows trust in one another and their devotion to each other, and reveals the blessings of intimacy that develops in a relationship between a husband and a wife that do, like Paul said, submits themselves to each other. They put each other first. And in fact, I think it uses the word to honor. The husband needs to honor his wife. To honor, I think putting the other first, to commend them, to hold them up, respecting each other, treating each other with honor. It says, until the day breathes. I guess that's going to be, I would think, early in the morning, but the way the verse goes on to read, says until the day breathes and the shadows flee. When the shadows flee, that's when it's getting dark, and you don't have the shadows. So, and it talks about, turn, my beloved, be like a gazelle. If you've ever been to a zoo and seen a gazelle, you don't see them outside of that much, but they're a little bit like our American antelopes. But a gazelle is well known for having big, beautiful eyes and being very sleek and bounding. And that then she talks about or a young stag on cleft mountains. The stag's be a male deer, and potentially that figurative language is just speaking to the male desire for intimacy, and she calls him her beloved. Those cleft mountains could be, in fact, the commentary. One of the commentaries said that there could have been two families separated by a mountain or living on different sides of a mountain. There could have actually been a mountain between them, but that anticipation of intimacy that she was doing before just would be a figurative way of referring to her breast. And of course, a woman's breast takes a great part in the intimacy that develops between a man and his wife. And finally, you get down to this restraint required, and you have the passage of chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. And I ask someone to read that.
All night long on my bed, I looked for the one my heart loves. I looked for him, but did not find him. I will go down. I will get up now and go about the city through its streets and squares. I will search for the one my heart loves. So I looked for him, but did not find him. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. Have you seen the one my heart loves? Scarcely have I passed them when I found the one my heart loves. I held him and would not let him go till I had brought him to my mother's house, to the room of the one who conceived me. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field, do not arouse or waken love until it so desires.
Let me just mention, if you read this whole Song of Song or Song of Solomon book at one time, it probably wouldn't take you 15 or 20 minutes. You're going to find these stories, this story in a different form later in the book. But there'll be a few differences, but you can clearly see it's kind of the same story. The commentaries think, she was dreaming. You ever had a dream when you were lost, or where somebody you were wanting to find, or that you really desired was lost and you couldn't find them, and you're looking in your dream and afraid you're never going to find them? I guess it'd be kind of like the panicky feeling that a mother or father might have in a big store, and they got a toddler that's running around, and all of a sudden they're looking for something, and they look around and their toddler's gone. And you get that panicky feeling of, where's my child? Well, this is kind of the panicky feeling that I think she was having in this dream of looking for her beloved. And she couldn't find him. She's, it's evidently a dream. She's in her bed, and it's at night, and she's can't find the man, and she keeps calling him the man whom I love, or whom my soul loves. And she finally, goes out to search for him. Now, if you remember a little bit of a description of cities back in those days, most of the cities had very narrow streets. I mean, I'm talking like almost trails between houses. And about the only place they had open spaces was near the city gates, and usually real near the city gates was where the main markets were. And they would be big open spaces. She looks for him, but she can't find him. No matter how she searches, she just can't find him. She's running from one street to another, looking and can't find him. And she's afraid that she's lost him forever in her dream. But then she's confronted by watchmen, people that were appointed, maybe soldiers even at night, to patrol the city and keep people safe, keep the robbers away. And as she continues to search for this one whom my soul loves, and says it's used language says the guards found her. Maybe she kind of got lost in the city. Again, in those days, young women didn't just run around on their own much. They were always chaperoned, or they were taken from place to place. But the guards found her, and eventually, though, right after that, she finds this man that she'd been searching for, and again she refers to him as whom my soul loves. And it just, she's dedicated to him exclusively and wants to be with him forever. And she decides she's, going to never let him go away from her. And she doesn't take him back to her bedroom. Instead, where does she take him? She takes him to her mother, the room where she was conceived. And the lesson pointed out that she's not going to give in to her desire for intimacy, but she's going to continue and make sure that there's a separation until it's the proper time, until after the wedding. However, I think maybe Robert and I would have a little different perspective in Asian cultures. Um, I'll tell you a quick story that happened to a friend of mine. He was about 27 or 8 years old, but he had a younger brother that was in college, and he had a girlfriend that he really liked there in the Philippines. And they had a long holiday coming up, and she wanted to go back to the province to visit her family, but she didn't have a companion to go with her. And honestly, in that culture, nobody goes anywhere by themselves. They always have a companion. They always want kasama, they call it. And so there wasn't a girl or anybody that lived up the direction where she had to go with her. So he just says, well, I'll go with you. Well, they get to bus, and this bus, it's a big bus, and they have probably 50, 60 people on a bus. But he rode with her most all of that day, going up north to the place where her parents lived. And when they got there, well, he helped her carry her baggage and stuff to her home. And when they got to her home, the parents had a fit that she was with this boy all day long without any chaperone. And they just pretty well demanded that they get married. Now, never mind, they were on a bus with about 50 people. But that didn't count because none of those were really a chaperone to this girl, their daughter. And this boy went with her all the way up there alone without a chaperone. And so they demanded they get married. And this is it's just kind of funny to us, but in that kind of culture, she could have brought him home to her mother at night, late at night. The mother gonna immediately think maybe they've been together. It could have been a way the young lady was making sure, because she says she never wants to let him go. So she brings him into her mother in the night. The family's going to demand that he has no choice. He is going to marry her. He can't change his mind. Okay, because of that culture, he's been out with her without a chaperone. So I think that's another little interpretation, that she's just not going to let him go. The last verse in our lesson says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, and this is supposed to be the girl speaking, the Shunamite bride-to-be. I assure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or by the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. So she turns her attention to the daughters of Jerusalem, all the other young unmarried women that she knows and that are out there in Jerusalem. And they would appreciate her dilemma of having these feelings for her betrothed and not being able to fulfill them yet. And she's saying basically, don't stir it up. Don't get in a situation with your future husband before you get married that would arouse your sexual interest and get things going that shouldn't be until after you're married. I remember one time when I was in seminary, I had a friend who pastored a church out near White Settlement between Fort Worth and Dallas. I think most of you know that area. And they had a couple of incidents where young teenagers had to end up getting married because they had relationships and the young woman got pregnant. And they had another couple of 2 or 3 couples of young couples that were going lots together, and the parents were afraid. And he asked me if I would come do a session with the young people in that church. and we had a session first with their parents, and told them how we were going to how I was going to handle that, and I was going to be pretty frank and pretty blunt and use some language that maybe some of them wouldn't be comfortable with, but and I remember, one of the things I've always told young people is, if you wait until you get in the car with your date and or with your buddies or girlfriends and try to decide later whether or not you're going to participate in whatever activities they're going on with, like drinking alcoholic beverages or smoking or marijuana today would be a big one, I guess, among teenagers, or taking some kind of pills or stuff like that. If you wait until you get into the peer pressure part of it, it's too late. Peer pressure is just too great. You need to decide before you go who you are, what you will do and what you won't do, both with your friends and with your boyfriend or girlfriend. You just want to cut it off before it starts, okay? And I remember, in that I told him, I said, well, what's going to happen when you get out on a date and you really like him and he really likes you, and you start to touching and feeling places that maybe you shouldn't be, and you're getting all excited and sexually excited. And I said, what do you do? And this one little girl, she just kind of hollered out in the class. She said, you get out of the car and run around the block. Everybody laughed a lot about it. And I said, yeah, that wouldn't be a bad move, just to go ahead and get out of the car and go for a little walk or something, get out of the situation. I think that's kind of like this gal, this Shulamite lady addressing these daughters of Jerusalem. They're just saying, don't get in the situation where you get the feelings of love stirred up that you can't fulfill, that shouldn't fulfill, because you're not married yet. Marriage is the proper place for sex, and that's taught all through the Bible. So while God's put those desires into us, it's part of us as men and women, but it's also something that we're to do according to God's plan. And the lesson just ending up, about this thing. And again, they're using the figurative language of the gazelles, the does, don't have restraint about sex, but God's people have been challenged to live according to his wisdom and to reserve that for marriage. And I think that's true. I even then, and even more so today, there's a lot of promiscuous sex going on among a lot of teenagers and college people and things, and couples, unmarried couples just going out, and you even see this in some of the programs on the television and such, where they're having sex. And one of the examples that I think I heard of and have used before with young people is, these little sticky pads that you can peel. You make a note and you peel it off and you stick it on the refrigerator, or you stick it someplace on a mirror where you can remember to do something. You stick it up there the first time, it sticks really good. You peel it off and move it and stick it someplace else. Well, it still sticks, but it's not quite as good. And if you peel it off and put it someplace else again, it sticks even less. It'll get to where it won't even stick to the wall. It'll just fall off. And the point of it was that, sex is kind of like the same thing. You end up and have sex the first time, it does stir up a feeling within you. And I dare say that just about every man and woman can remember the first time they ever had sex. It never seems to go away. You always remember that first time. But for couples that end up being, or individuals that end up being promiscuous and keeping on, that feeling, that adhesion lessens and lessens, and it just gets easier to break up a marriage with the sex, because it's so easy to fall into a trap of having sex with somebody else because you didn't wait. You didn't hold it, as God said, until marriage. And so I think that is a pretty good lesson for today. But most all of us are not anticipating getting married. Most of us have been married for years, but we do understand and see what's going on in our culture today. So it'd be good lessons if we could help teach them, if we have the opportunities, to our grandkids. Most of our kids are also grown, and hopefully everybody's kids are doing well in that respect. But in today's culture and all of the things that are on television and in the movies, even the advertisements, everything seems to be built around sex, 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 and it's a difficult to not get into that trap when it's just hammered at you all the time. And so you can understand what a lot of these young people are going through. I'm glad my sons are already grown and my oldest son's going to have his first grandchild coming up in September. So that's good. But I think raising your children in the church and getting the teachings of the church is a good way to help protect them. And again, it's supposed to be the man that sets the stage, that sets the standards for the family, and even going to church. Darlene and I, before we got married, we just understood that when Sunday came around, we're going to be in church if it's possible. That's just who we are. I think that's some things that the man of the house is supposed to take the lead in, and too many men are a little weak in that. So, any comments? Next week, Robert gets to continue the lesson. And like I said, this is a little book. I don't know about you. I don't remember ever having a lessons on Song of Solomon. I really don't. The book's always been there, but I don't remember ever having a lesson. And perhaps it's because it's such a book about sex and relationships between a man and a woman. Most of the time, the quarterlies just wanted to dodge it. But it's a big part of life. So a healthy sexual relationship is part of a healthy marriage, and that's just the way we're built, and God is the one that built us that way. So we just need to take care of that in our life. That's one thing where the woman's to be submissive and the man's to be submissive and honoring and respecting the wife. So if it all is as Paul writes there in that passage in Ephesians, I think you got a good chance of, shall we say, keeping the peace. So, okay, that's about it for my end.
Want to say anything?
No,
Oh.
I'm good.
Will, that was wonderful. Thank you for the illustrations and just pointing out to us that, you know, this is a part of God's word, relates to our lives. And thank you for doing the hard work. You've done the hard work, so next Sunday my job won't be quite as challenging, but appreciate that so much. And good to see those of you that are online also. And Will, you want to lead us in the closing prayer as we wrap up our time today?
Yes. Lord, we thank you for the day. We thank you for the worship service that we had and the message that we heard from Jeremy. And we just pray you to continue to bless him and keep him in your word and keep everybody safe and well in his family as these kids are beginning to grow and little changes in style of living. We thank you for that. We thank you for the folks in our class. We pray that you'd continue to bless them and keep them well too. There's all this virus thing going around. We just pray that you'd bring some healing and some life back to normalcy as soon as possible. We continue to pray for Darlene to heal up good from this hips replacement that she's had, and just thank you for the progress that she's making. And we'd continue to pray for our president and Congress and just help them to do some right things in the future. And with all these elections coming up, we just pray for your will to be done. Just continue to bless our senior pastor and staff and all they've been trying to minister to others this week. And just pray that you'd bless our families and not only just the members of our class, but a lot of them that have kids and grandkids and maybe even great grandkids, that we might be able to help impart some of the wisdom that you provided us through this little book of Songs of Solomon. Just pray for good, healthy relationships within our own families and within the families of our kids especially. Just pray that you'd bless it all in Jesus' name. Amen. So, been good to see y'all.
Good to see you too.
Notice my southern y'all.
Yeah.
How do you say that in the Philippines?
Oh, yeah. How do you say y'all in the Philippines, Will?
Well, let's see. There's one you can, well, it's not as much. Mabuhay is kind of like greetings or welcome, you know, to y'all. Lord, right now, I just can't even, wasn't thinking about that. So I can't think offhand of I'm getting old. My wife said, what?
Well, the word lahat, like mabuhay lahat.
Yeah.
Lahat means everybody.
Yeah, mabuhay lahat means, yeah, welcome or hello to everybody. But I was trying to think, you know, I was trying to think of another word that we used a lot in church, but I just don't remember right now. It caught me off guard. If I'd been thinking about that, I could work it out, but I need to maybe have my Filipino friends around where I can start getting a little of my Tagalog going.
That's okay.
Tagalog is
We'll accept the
main
y'all.
language in the Philippines. They have about 50 languages in the Philippines, but Tagalog is the language of government, and so that's the one that we mostly worked in, because you can pretty well be understood in Tagalog all over the Philippines, even though the other speakers are Cebuano, Ilocano, or Waray, or many different language groups. But they all pretty well know Tagalog because it's the language of government, language of most of the newspapers and the televisions. So, but Mabuhay is one way, but, and you just say, ¿Cómo está? You know, how are you? You know, it's like Spanish. Or, ¿Cómo está kayo? How are all of you?
Muy bien, gracias.
And the answer to that is usually Mabuti. I'm good. I'm good. So.
Well, a great time of fellowship, and we'll gather again next Sunday. And if you know anybody that missed the time this morning, we'll hopefully have it up later this afternoon by video. Y'all have a great week.
Okay. Try to read that whole little book of Song of Solomon. It's good.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.